Hello everyone, and welcome back to BGATVHT, the show where we do gaming commentaries every other day. And man, it's been a while. Since Season 8 came out, I had to stream, and well, I'm done with that. I'm not going back to that. If there are gonna be any more streams, which there will be, it's gonna be on Apex. So anyway, let's get into the topic of today's video, which is Anthem. Just Anthem in general, nothing specific about it. Just, I'm gonna be doing my quick play on it. Cause, man, this game, despite the terrible reviews from critics and reviewers and just generally people everywhere, Anthem does not deserve that score that it's gotten. It doesn't. Trust me. When I say this, Anthem is not a 6 out of 10 game. It is not a 5 out of 10 game. Anthem is an 8 to 8.5 out of 10 game. And don't start running to the comments and typing hate that I'm just a shill or whatever, because I'm not. And I'm gonna tell you that these reviewers, if that's gonna be another part of the video, possibly even another video entirely. But let's get into the actual game. So first off, when you're in your Javelin, the controls are unlike any other game that you've probably played. You can run, jump, fly, hover, or dive, and they all require you to use a little bar, which is like your overheating bar, and when that gets full, you just kind of crash into the ground. These are actually aspects of the movement that are used in combat that most reviewers actually don't seem to realize. When they say, oh, I didn't like the game because the guns weren't interesting, or I didn't like the game because it was so unforgiving, that's completely wrong, because you weren't playing the game right, actually, in that regard. How you're supposed to play is you're supposed to be using your abilities all the time. Your guns are more like a backup weapon, if anything. You're not supposed to be running around, hiding behind cover, shooting stuff, especially as a Storm or Interceptor, which are the weaker classes of the game. With the Storm, you're supposed to at least be hovering in the air and be shooting down your elemental attacks on people, because while you're hovering, your shield is stronger than if you were just on the ground shooting. Now, shooting from this position is also very helpful, especially if you have a higher level gun. But the real meat of what you're supposed to be doing and the real meat of the damage that you're doing to the enemies are from your abilities, and your abilities recharge faster or slower depending on like how powerful they are. And this whole ability system goes deeper with priming and detonating. Priming is basically getting a enemy kind of like stunned. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage. It can still do quite a bit of damage, but it doesn't do tons of damage. And it isn't as good at killing enemies as, say, a detonator. A detonator is what you or another player can use after someone has primed the enemy. And this could be, usually detonators do a whole lot more damage than primers, and is like the encore to the performance that the primer was. And then there are like special abilities that are neither primers nor detonators, that just do more blast damage than anything else. And combining all these three abilities, you can absolutely obliterate any team of enemies or type of enemies that you encounter through the entire game, but people who reviewed the game don't understand this. They're hiding behind cover, they're shooting, they're not using their abilities because they're trying to play it like Destiny. And this game isn't Destiny. It is completely not built in any regard like that game, and it shouldn't be treated that way because otherwise you're going to fail. Even some of the people I play with have had this problem where they're just on the ground shooting, they're not hovering, and they have a really hard time. And then one person on their team is actually going the correct way, and then they get teased for it because the other people don't know. Anyway, let's continue on. Guns. It's not the most important aspect of the game, but it is still an important aspect nonetheless. The guns generally feel, with their aesthetic, a little bit samey, but that's okay because you're not really using them that much in the first place. If you were going to have a game like Battlefield, you would really want the guns to look interesting or at least different from one another because that's the main weapon you're using. You may have a like a support thing you're using, like a mortar that you would put down. But with Anthem, all the guns have the same aesthetic of kind of a rugged, patched together, almost kind of look, but still refined and manufactured, which is an aesthetic I do quite like. They do have kind of the same patterns and kind of mix and matched color schemes because that kind of goes along with the rugged feel. And yet there is still the fact that they do look similar, which is kind of a little confusing to me. Like, they could have made them look a little bit more different, and then it wouldn't really be that much of an issue, but since they all look kind of similar, it's alright, but it's not great. The gunplay itself is pretty good. It's not really the most refined aspect of the game. I could do a little tweaking on it, and some of your firing sounds do have some audio glitches, which I will get into later in the negative section of this video. But overall, the shooting with most guns, there are LMGs, assault rifles, pistols, shotguns, sniper rifles, marksman rifles, grenade launchers, most of the stuff you would normally see. However, I would say that, you know, since this isn't the main way you're going to be killing enemies, that when you're trying to play the game while shooting guns the way you would use it when you're playing abilities, which is kind of like you're dodging a lot and it's all explodey because there's tons of other people using explodey stuff, that it does feel a little bit crazy. And yeah, so now let's get into Fort Tarsus. So, Fort Tarsus, definitely much better than in the demo. If you watched my demo video talking about my experiences with the demo, I'll say that Fort Tarsus, you did need to move faster. You did, it was still a little kind of closed in. Well, you move faster. That's a good thing. The area has been slightly expanded, and it does expand a little more over time, but only a tiny bit. The conversations that you have in Fort Tarsus while talking to the many residents of the fort can range from being sad, hilarious, disheartening, funny, or just downright a serious problem. Some of these conversations will tie in with others. Some will have serious impacts on your relationships with characters, and some will have no effect on the story or future conversations. Some conversations you will have serious effects on people's well-beings. You could go along and try to help them a more gentle way, or be straightforward, almost a little bit cold with how you present yourself and how blunt you are with trying to help people. Like, let's say there's somebody who is kind of a little delusional and doesn't know thinks you are someone who you're not. You could either go outright and say, I'm not this person. I'm a freelancer. Or you could say, yeah, I am this person. I've been gone a while. And then that slowly helps them realize that that's not who you are in the first place. Uh, some of the times you will use both of these sides and combine them to make certain situations either unexpectedly go in a crazy direction or sometimes go in the way you really wanted them to. Overall, the conversations are great. And some of these conversations tie into the story. Now let's talk about the story. Basically, without spoiling anything, the story is about the Heart of Rage, which is something that the freelancers failed to stop 10 years ago, I think. And basically that caused the decline of the freelancers. It caused the destruction of one of Bastion, which is one of the human country's greatest cities, Freemark, and put freelancers on the decline in general. Sentinels became more prominent. Instead of them working together, the Sentinels kind of lorded over and kind of like went in and just started hating the freelancers a little bit. And freelancers were on the decline. They weren't getting as many contracts to actually help with stuff. But suddenly, the Dominion are back. And they are going back for what they left and didn't finish years ago. And the villain of this game, the Monitor, is a much better villain, in my opinion, than the Destiny 2 villain, which I don't even remember his name. It was just like a guy in a mask. And you could say the same thing about the Monitor. You never know his real name. You never know all this other stuff about him. But, I mean, when he walks into the room the first time, and it's like your freelancer's like, I'm gonna beat you up, and then the Monitor's like, yeah, nah, and like flicks you away. But he doesn't really do that. But it is really cool, and he does have a demeanor that makes you feel really kind of almost threatened by him. Some relationships you do have with characters change throughout the story, and actually, some things that you thought were just a playful desire end up changing a character's entire motive later on in the story. Overall, I'd give this story about a 7 out of 10. It's nowhere near the greatest story I've ever seen, but it is far better than the worst I've ever seen. So let's get into the negatives about this game. First off, glitches and crashes and just problems in general. So there are definitely glitches in this game. If you are super overpowered and you just obliterate a massive enemy like in a Scar Eye, which is a Scar that's like a Scar leader, it's kind of a robot, but you kill the Scar Eye super fast before they're done talking. The mission can't end. Even if it was at the end of the mission, it will not say mission complete and boot you back to the fort. You'll just be sitting there forever. This has happened to me personally, twice actually, until we realized that we were killing the enemy too fast and we had to actually let it monologue. You know, that's one thing that I would never expect to see in a game, and it's not the greatest thing, but yeah, we had to let a villain monologue on about destroying the fort before we could actually go and kill it. And now, as crazy as that might sound, it's true, that did happen. It's something that I can't believe they overlooked during certification, and I would have thought they would have caught that, because wouldn't you be playing through these levels with all manner of levels of power on all the difficulties to see if there were any glitches like that? Well, that happened, as well as the audio glitches that I mentioned earlier, which, yeah, they're not great. Especially when you're using the Sledgehammer LMG, I noticed that the sound of the bullets would start to static, and then the rest of the sound would static, and then sometimes voice lines during missions would also static. Another very big problem that is actually like one of the bigger gripes I have with this game is that there are decoy conversations, is what I'm gonna call them, where it's basically like you have the game tell you there's a conversation with Matthias, you go to Matthias, and then there's no conversation there. So you look at the map and you're like, well, it said there was a conversation here. So you look at the map and it's a grayed out speech bubble while the one that had an actual conversation would be orange. This actually happens with multiple people. Some of them just outright disappear. We can't figure out what's wrong with them. Another problem is with QuickPlay. I've only heard of this through word of mouth. I haven't experienced this myself, as after hearing these complaints, I've been a little scared to try to go into QuickPlay, which is that, like, almost all the time when you go into QuickPlay, there's a ton of bugs or things that are just not the greatest, and makes your experience kind of a little meh. The only I wouldn't have a problem with this if only you didn't have to do quick play missions for the challenges of the Legionnaire, which is basically the end game. Okay, it's basically the challenges of the Legionnaire is what you do after you're done with all of the agent quests, the story quests, and all that stuff, and then you're just doing contracts. And the challenges of the Legionnaire is like contracts or missions, strongholds, killing enemies, well, that sort of thing. But quick play doesn't work like that. It's so strange that, like, quick play has all these problems, and that is really what makes this a little bit like, so yeah, this is also, sorry, the launch bay. It's alright. There are definitely some bugs. You'll see some headless lancers around. I don't know if that's an Easter egg or a bug. I hope it's a bug because it could freak some people out. Either way, yeah, so my final verdict on this game, give it an 8 out of 10. So, yeah, I guess that's about it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. And this is Brandon from Big McLarge Gaming, signing off. Goodbye.